In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to set up and use HomeAssistant. Check it out. What's going on, guys? I hope you're all doing well. Before we dive into what presence detection and HomeAssistant are, there's a couple of things I want to point out. First of all then is the target audience. Now this video is aimed at anybody that's got any kind of HomeAssistant experience, so whether you're a beginner or you're more advanced, this video should cater to you. I would say that this video leans slightly more towards beginners, but if you are an advanced user, then just make use of the chapters below and just jump over the parts that you don't need to listen to. I'll be working through each of the steps you're going to need to get this up and running, and if you do have any issues, just drop them in the comments below or head over to my social media and leave a comment there, and either myself or one of the other community members will be able to help you out. And secondly, this video is going to be in multiple parts, but I'm not sure when each part's going to come out, so the best way for you to stay up to date with that is if you press that subscribe button and you ding dong that little notification bell, you'll be alerted to when the video comes out. As always, the videos are chaptered, so if you're bored of me babbling on and want to just get straight into the good, then check out the description and go ahead and pick your chapter. Let's start off then by looking at what presence detection and HomeAssistant are. So presence detection kind of gives it away a bit with its name. It's the ability to be able to detect presence. Now this can be done in multiple different ways. You could use cameras, motion sensors, sound, thermal imaging, or Bluetooth tracking. And what I mean when I'm talking about presence detection is, can I tell if a particular person or a particular device is in a set room or set location? HomeAssistant then is some software that utilises this data and information given from the presence detection and passes it into a smart home automation system, and in this case it's HomeAssistant. If you're currently sat there thinking, what could I even do with this? Well, I've got a few ideas for you. So this software is going to allow you to know what particular room you're in, but more importantly it's going to allow HomeAssistant to know this information too. And having HomeAssistant know this information is going to be super powerful because you can tie this location in with automations and scripts. And these scripts and automations are going to be able to follow you around the house because they're going to know what room you're in. So for example, you could have lights that follow you around the house where they turn on and off depending on which room you're in. So as you enter one room, the lights automatically come on, and as you leave it, the lights go off. The same with music. You could start playing music in one room and it's going to follow you around the house, turning off whenever you leave a set room. Announcements and notifications from your Amazon Echo or Google Assistant can also be done with this. So any announcements that they make can target a specific room that you're in and play on that device. If you want any more information about HomeAssistant, there'll be a link to this webpage in the description below. This is the official HomeAssistant page, so there's information on how to set it up. There's a few guides on here which we'll actually be making use of in this video. There's also a forum and some other bits on the page, so go check that out if you're interested. Let's get on to the fun stuff then and start looking at what hardware and what software we're going to need in order to complete this project. Now, there are a few different ways to go about setting up HomeAssistant, but for this video, the methods I've chosen are just ones that I decided to use. If you're after any other way to set up HomeAssistant, then go and check the HomeAssistant website. If you've got any personal experience with setting up and using HomeAssistant, and you've got any better ways of doing things, or maybe I didn't cover something in enough detail, then let me know in the comments below. Let's start with the software we're going to need then. So first and most importantly, we're going to need a working version of HomeAssistant. We're then going to need some software in order to write an image to an SD card. In this video, we're going to be using the Pi Imager, but you can use anything you want. And the last bit of software we're going to need then is some kind of SSH client. And again, you can use whatever your preferred one is. In this video, I'm going to be using MobaXterm, but you could use the Windows command line, Mac terminal, or PuTTY. Again, it's up to you. If you've got all three bits of those software, then you should be good to go. If not, there'll be links in the description below so you can go and grab those. And on the off chance, if you haven't got HomeAssistant set up, there'll be a link in the description for a video that I've done showing you how to set that up too. Onto the hardware then. As I mentioned, there are a few different ways to go about setting up HomeAssistant. The method that we're going to be following in this video is the way that uses the Raspberry Pi Zero W. Now, you can use a Raspberry Pi 3 or a Raspberry Pi 4 if you've got those to hand. I've gone with the Raspberry Pi Zero W because it's got a nice small form factor and I don't need the additional power that the Raspberry Pi 3 and 4 have, as it's just going to be running just HomeAssistant. In this video I am going to be using two Raspberry Pi Zero Ws. You can just use one if you want, but the idea is to have one device per each room that you want to be able to track. So for each of these bits of hardware listed, you are going to need to scale up depending on how many you add. So I'm using two, so I'm going to need two of everything. Okay, so we're going to need an SD card reader, 2 Raspberry Pi Zero Ws, 2 power supplies for the Pi Zeros. Now I would recommend you use something that's going to give out 5 volts, and 2 SD cards. Now for the size of the SD card, it doesn't matter too much if you're just going to be using it just for HomeAssistant. So I have successfully set this up and ran it on a card that's just 2 gig, but in the example here, I think I've got a 32 gig card and a 64 gig card. If you've got all those things, we should now be good to go. And if you're missing any of those things, I'll have links in the description below for the bits that I've used. My Pi Zeros have kind of got like a nice acrylic case on them with a little heatsink there. Now, if you're interested in those, you can grab those off Amazon, and again, there'll be a link in the description below. The first thing we're going to do then is to flash our SD card. So put your SD card in the card reader and plug that into your machine. We're then going to want to open up the Pi imager, so we're going to do that now. Once that's opened up then, we're going to want to hit Choose OS, and we're going to click Raspberry Pi OS Other, and we're going to go for the Raspberry Pi OS Lite. Now the reason we're going for this one is because we're not really caring about the whole desktop environment, because we're not going to be doing anything with the graphical interface. So just go for Raspberry Pi OS 32-bit. And then for the SD card, we're going to just choose our SD card that's in the drive. And if you've got it plugged in, you should be able to see it in this list. So my one's here and it's a 32 gig SD card. We're then just going to hit write and yes. This is then going to start writing, and it might take a few minutes to run through the process. Once that's finished, we're going to get a pop-up like this to say write successful and that the SD card can be removed. We're going to just click continue there, and then we're just going to close the Pi imager for now. We're then going to want to add 2 files to the SD card. So to do this, we're going to need to open up the File Explorer, and we're going to go to this PC, and we're going to navigate to our SD card. So in my case, it was mounted to drive E, so I'm just going to go in that. Now, I haven't got a drive label or anything here, it's just coming up as the E drive, but yours might show up as boot. It depends on the Pi image you use. So this one doesn't have one, but this is the main boot section of the drive. As I said, we're going to be adding 2 files. The first one is going to be to allow us to SSH into the Pi, and the second one's going to allow our Pi to connect to the Wi-Fi. Let's add those files now then. So a super simple way to do this is to just take a file that's already here and just modify it. So I'm going to grab this config.txt, for example. I'm going to copy that and then just paste it. I'm then going to rename it, and I'm also going to remove the file extension there. And we're just going to call it SSH and hit enter. And then if we've done that right, it's going to pop up a box telling us we're removing the extension. Are we sure? It might become unstable, and we're just going to press yes. And we'll see now we've got an SSH file, and the type is file. If your SSH file is not a type file and it still says it's a text document, it means it hasn't written it properly. So what you'll need to do is, if you just click view at the top here, there's an option then to view file name extensions. If you just tick that, you should be able to see the dot extension on the end. So just remove that and just do what I previously did there, and you should be good to go. Oh, that was a bit long-winded, but yeah, you get the idea. We're then just going to edit the SSH file. So we're going to go right click, we're going to go open with, and then we're just going to choose Notepad. If you've got Notepad++ installed, you could just click edit there. So here's our text file. We don't care about any of this because it's the config, so we're just going to select all of it and choose delete. We're then just going to go file and save. I'm going to close that, and that's the SSH file done. Next up, we're going to want to add our file that's going to allow our Pi to connect to the Wi-Fi. So to do this, a super simple way again, we're just going to copy the SSH file we made, paste that, and we're going to rename this, and we're going to call this wpa_supplicant.conf and hit enter. If you've done that right with the .conf extension, your file type should be conf file. And again, we're going to just go into this with edit. So right click, open with, and we're going to go more and Notepad and OK. In this file then, we're going to just paste in a config that's going to let the Pi connect to the network. I'll leave this in the description, so if you want to grab that from there and then just modify it to fit your needs. So paste that in there, and the bits that you're going to need to change here is the country here. So you're going to want to put your country name there. So if you're in the US, for example, you change that to US. I'm in the UK, so just UK. And then in the network then, you're going to want to enter your Wi-Fi name and your password. So enter those and then just click file and save. You can then just close that down, and we're done with both of those files. So you've got the SSH file and the wpa_supplicant.conf file. So let's close that down and then eject the SD card. If you're adding multiple devices to HomeAssistant, so in this video we're going to be adding 2, you could repeat this step now just to save yourself some time. So we've now got 2 Raspberry Pi 0Ws with that image on both of them and both sets of files on both Pis. You don't need to do it now, but if you're confident with this setup and you've done this many times, then just do it now, save yourself a bit of time. So put your SD card in your Pi and then we're going to plug the Pi in. Our Pi is connected now and it's just booting up, so we're going to need to connect to it. In order to do this, we're going to need the IP address of the Pi. This is kind of like a grey area for this tutorial really, because there's so many different ways to go about getting the IP for your Pi that I couldn't possibly cover them all. Everyone's going to have different networks and different setups. In my last project video, where I showed you how to set up HomeAssistant on a Raspberry Pi, by far the question I was asked the most was how do I get my IP address? So I'm going to give you a couple of different ways to do that here, and hopefully one of those should work for you. Now again, there's lots of different ways to do this, so pick the one that's best for you. If you already know what your IP address is or how to get it, then just skip ahead to the SSH part, and if you're not, then here's a few steps for how you can get your IP. First of all, you can go into your router's configuration page. Each router usually has a page like this, and in there somewhere you should be able to view any of the wireless devices connected to your network. And you'll be looking for one probably called raspberrypi.local. If you're not sure how to find this page for your particular router, it's best to just do a little Google search and you should be able to find it easily. Another way to get the IP address of the Pi is by using an app or a program to scan your network. This will then print out anything that bounces back from scanning the IP range. There's a whole bunch of different iOS and Android apps available that will allow you to scan your network. So there's things like Fing, IP Scanner, but it's up to you which method you use. I'll use a desktop one here just so I can show it you on the desktop. And the one that I'm going to use is just called Angry IP Scanner, and it's free to use and it will work on Mac, Linux and Windows. So this is the web page for it, and there'll be a link in the description for this page. So go ahead and download that. If it wasn't clear, you only need to do this if you don't know what your IP is and you don't want to use the router settings or the third step, which I'll show you after this one. So only for step 2 do this. So we've got Angry IP downloaded. We're going to run it from wherever you've got it saved. It will then give you your IP range, so the to and from range. By default, it'll just detect whatever you connected to. So just leave it as that and just click start. This is then just going to ping all of the different ranges on your network. And once that's done, you'll get a little pop-up to say that the scan's completed. You'll then just want to scroll through that list and you should be able to see something called raspberrypi.local. And then that IP address next to Raspberry Pi local will be the IP of your Pi. If you're adding multiple Raspberry Pis at the same time, I would suggest you just do this step if you're using the Angry IP one at a time, just to make it easier to distinguish between the different Pis. The third way you can connect to your Pi without an IP address is by just connecting to the hostname of the Pi directly in the SSH client. So by default, the Raspberry Pi will have the hostname raspberrypi.local. To do that, we're going to need to open up our SSH client. Again, I'm using MarkWattTech, but you can use whatever your preferred one is. So if it's PuTTY, Terminal, whatever. So open that up and we're going to then just start an SSH session. So with MarkWattTech, we just go to Sessions, New Session, SSH, and then we need to enter the host name. The host name then, or the remote host, is the name of the device. So if you've done either of the first 2 steps then to get your IP address, you could also just put the IP address here. We're doing the third step where we don't know what our IP address is. So we're going to enter the host name, which we know is raspberrypi.local, and that's what it is by default. So we're going to just enter that in here. There's then an option to specify a username. By default, the Raspberry Pi always starts with the Raspberry Pi default username, which is just Pi. So we can give it the raspberrypi.local hostname and the username there as Pi. We want to go with port 22 and we're just going to hit OK. We're then going to be asked for the password for the user Pi. By default, the user is always Pi and the password is always Raspberry. So we're going to just enter that now and hit enter. Now, don't worry if you can't see the password type in, it is actually typing. If you've managed to log in with no issues, you should see a screen like this. The next couple of steps then are going to be, we're just going to be entering a few commands in order to get the Pi and HomeAssistant set up. Now, you don't need to be a Linux expert in order to do this. It can just be a case of copy and paste. You don't really need to know what the commands are doing. However, if you are interested in what a particular command is doing, then feel free to ask in the comments below, or if you have a look on the HomeAssistant guide, there might be a bit of detail on the command there. Another way to get your IP address, which I actually forgot to show on the first time round recording, is when you're actually in the terminal, if you just type hciconfig and hit enter, it will actually bring up your IP address. So you can see the IP address of the Pi I'm on here is highlighted here. The first thing we're going to do then is to just change the password of the Pi so that it's not the default one. So if we just type password as it mentions above there, so it's just PASSWD and hit enter. It's then going to ask us for the current password and it's going to allow us to change the password. So we're going to enter that now and then enter the new password and retype the password. And that's the password updated then. The next thing we're going to want to do is to update the host name of the Pi. So if we give it a more friendly name, when we're looking at it on the network, we'll be able to identify what it is a lot easier. So if we call it, say, kitchen, instead of Raspberry Pi.local, it's going to be a bit more identifiable. So let's do that now. So we're going to want to enter the command sudo raspberry config and hit enter. We're then going to go into system options and just hit enter. We're then going to go down to host name and hit enter. And then just OK on that. We're then just going to give the Pi a name. So I'm just going to call this one kitchen. I'm going to store this Pi in the kitchen, and this will be the sensor in the kitchen then that detects if I'm in the kitchen or not. So I've named that kitchen, and then I'm just going to go down to OK and enter, and then go down to finish. Once you've clicked finish then, it'll ask you if you want to reboot. We're just going to choose yes. This is just going to take a minute now to reboot. Usually with most SSH clients, you can just automatically reconnect. But as we've changed the host name, we're not going to be able to do that. So we're just going to hit enter now to exit out of here. We're now going to want to start a new SSH session using the host name that we've just given the Pi. If you knew what your IP address was and you connected originally on the IP, you could just automatically reconnect. But as we've changed the host name using that third option, we're going to have to just start a new session now. So we'll start a new session, and we're going to have to use the new host name that we've given the Pi. So that I renamed it to kitchen, so we've swapped it now to kitchen.local as opposed to the Raspberry Pi.local, and we're going to specify the username again, which is Pi and port 22, and we're just going to click OK. So you'll need to switch kitchen out to whatever you've called your device, and I'm going to enter the new password I created for the Pi. Okay, we're logged back in now and we're ready to enter a few more commands. We're now going to need to install Node.js, and again the command for this will be in the description below, so grab that and you can just paste that in. Once you've pasted that, just hit enter. This is going to take a couple of minutes then just to install all of this. There's going to be a lot of waiting around in this tutorial while you wait for things to download, so if you're bored and you've got a minute, why don't you check out my social media. That's the first bit done. If you get this error message here telling you it can't create the symbolic link, it's okay to just ignore this part. We're then going to need to add a new path for Node.js. Again, get that command from the description, paste that in. That command's going to open up the nano editor. Now, if all of this looks a bit scary, then don't worry. So we're actually at the top of the document here where this sort of white cursor is. We're going to just need to press down on the keyboard. So you want to go down, down, down to the end of the document here, and then again grab the command from the description, and we're just going to enter that here. So just paste it in, and it's that path variable there. Once that's pasted in, and make sure it's below all of this, you're going to just hit Control and X. It's then going to ask you if you want to save. If you just press the Y key and then hit enter, and that's that done. Next command then, we're going to just copy again and paste that in. We're now going to need to update all of our packages and download any dependencies we need. This is actually 3 commands, but you can paste it all in as one big long command and just press enter, and it's then just going to sequentially run through all of those commands. During this process, it's going to ask you to confirm the install, and you're just going to need to press yes. So just hit Y and press enter. And again, we wait. This time while you're waiting, why not hit that subscribe button? If you press the subscribe button and ding dong the notification bell, you'll be alerted to when the other parts of this video come out. Okay then, once you see the little username in green there with the $sign come up, you know that that's finished, and that should be all the dependencies and updates that we need. Just a few commands left then and we'll be done. This next one is going to install HomeAssistant, and this command actually takes the longest to run, so I would definitely suggest go get a cup of tea or a coffee or something and just let this run. Again, grab it from the description and paste it in, and then just sit back and wait for it to start doing its thing. While we're waiting for HomeAssistant to install then, I've got a bit of a competition that I'm going to be doing, and the competition prize is going to be everything that you need in order to upgrade your HomeAssistant on a Raspberry Pi from an SD card to an SSD. On my channel I've got a couple of videos where I show you how to do that, and they'll be linked in the description. And the prize includes a 240 gig SSD and the cable you'll need to connect your Pi to the SSD. So if you're interested in entering that, there's going to be a couple of things you need to do. First of all, make sure you're subscribed, and secondly, if you enter a comment below saying win dash, then I want you to give me the name of your favourite HomeAssistant add-on and the reason it's your favourite. I'll be announcing the winner of the competition in a few weeks, so be sure to follow me on my social media as well to find out who's won that, and I'll ship this out to wherever you are, so good luck. And we're back with HomeAssistant finally installed. For me, this took just over 20 minutes, and I think it depends what device you're installing on and also your network connection speed. During your install, you may have seen a lot of sort of purple warnings popping up, but that's all fine and you can just leave those. Those little warnings popping up were expected, so we're all okay. We're very near the end now with just a few commands left to run, so before we do those, we're just going to reboot our Pi now. So in the terminal, we're going to just do sudo reboot and hit enter. Give that a minute and then you can just hit the R key and it will just reconnect. We've then got another few commands that we're going to enter, and again this is a set of 3 commands and you can paste them all in together, so copy those from the description, paste them in, and then we're just going to hit OK and enter. With these 3 commands, if you enter the commands before you've done a reboot, you might get some errors as it won't know how to link together, so I recommend you do that reboot. Next up then, we need to create the config file for HomeAssistant. Again, just paste that command in and enter. We're then going to need to add some configuration data to this. So we're going to enter the nano editor again, and we're going to create this local YAML file. And again, in here, we're just going to paste in a copy of the config from the description below. So paste that in and hit OK. And we're not going to worry about these details for now. We're just going to hit Control X again and the Y key to save, and then enter. So we're going to end this one here for now, guys. And just to recap what we've done in this video, we've gone through the whole configuration process to get HomeAssistant installed on our Raspberry Pi. So this could be the Pi 0 like we've used in the video, or it could be a Pi 3 or a Pi 4. This has been the most lengthy, time-consuming part of the tutorial because we have to wait for all these downloads and do a few different commands in order to get the actual config set up and ready. But we now have the bare bones HomeAssistant installed and it's ready to be connected to the MQTT broker, and in the next video we're going to be setting up the MQTT broker on HomeAssistant. And once we've got the broker set up, we'll be able to come back to the config on this, connect the Pi to the broker, and then we'll have some communication going on then. We'll then be able to make use of the sensors and be able to start doing actual room detection. I will be releasing the next part back to back with this one, so you shouldn't have to wait too long in order to carry on the tutorial. If you've enjoyed this video, found it interesting, or it's helped you out, then drop me a like rating. Again, if you press that subscribe button and ding dong the notification bell, you'll be alerted to whenever the next part comes out for this video series. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.